Hello Battle Cats players, my name is Chance and welcome to my guide. Today we are going to be looking at probably one of the most used offensive normal cats in the game. We are looking at Lizard Cat. Now Lizard Cat is the 8th cat you're likely to unlock, and he is unit ID number 7. As soon as you clear Egypt in Empire of Cats Chapter 1 and spend about 7,000 XP, you can get him unlocked. You can also get him unlocked using cat capsules or the Summer Break Cats Gacha. He's an interesting unit. I really like him. I really like using him. I remember when I first got him and my first time ever playing Battle Cats, I was blown away by how effective he was. And there is a key meta that you're going to want to know for this cat in particular. And he will likely be the result of many glorious victories, and he will also likely be the result in a fair bit of heartache as well. And we will cover that all in a little bit. Before we do, however, let's take a look at his overall evolutions. So, first and foremost, he follows the exact same progression as all the other normal cats do. Starts out as Lizard Cat, whose description reads, able to attack enemies from a distance, powerful, single-shot, long-range attack. And then at level 10, he evolves into Dragon Cat. Found its way here from a fantasy world, powerful, single-shot, long-range attack. And then at level 20 plus 10, available through cat capsules, he evolves into King Dragon Cat, whose description reads, don't ask how he made it into the Dragon Elite. Excellent long-distance attacks, powerful single-shot ranged attack. And in case you were curious about his appearances, as a normal form, looks like a cat with stubby arms, large hind legs, and a tail, attacks by spewing small pink ember. This is his evolved form. Now has a tail, dragon-like body with scales on its belly, more defined arms, tiny spinies along its back, rears back before breathing pink fire at the enemy when attacked, and its true form is described as Dragon Cat has attained kingship, loses the belly scales for spikes, has 2 sets of horns on its head with an extra pair of back legs, breathes a large pink flame when attacking. Pretty cool stuff overall, and its descriptions are actually fairly telling as to what it does. Now let's move on to its performance. As I'm sure you've gathered by this point, Lizard Cat is considered to be a backliner, which means he's really the first backliner we get. Backliners are units with range 400 to 499. And hand in hand with being a backliner, he has a long-range attack. As I'm sure you know if you've seen our previous videos, a lot of this game can be boiled down to attack range. If you can outrange your opponents, odds are you're going to be able to beat them. The rationale behind this is if you can hit them, but they can't hit you, things are in your favor. Lizard Cat also has fairly high health and attack power, which is great. However, single target, high cost, low attack rate, and his true form has a pretty brutally long cooldown, at least for his intended use case. Now, I hear you asking, what is his intended use case exactly? This is a lot of hype for a cat that appears kind of meh on the surface. Let me show you some gameplay, first and foremost, while I talk about this, and let's get into some strategy. Before I get too deep into the strategy, of course, it is worth noting that in Chapter 1, he costs 1,000 cents, Chapter 2, 1,500 cents, and Chapter 3, 2,000 cents. So he's really not that cheap of a unit at any point. But let's now move on to his official strategy here. Let me tell you about the amazing world of dragon stacking. Now, we've kind of sort of covered stacking at one point, but I'll just put a clear definition on it. Stacking is the idea of overlapping multiple units so their attacks virtually sync up, right? Odds are you've seen stacking happen at many points in your game up until this point, predominantly because a lot of the normal cats are just spammable units, and Tank Cat is a great meat shield. So stacking just kind of happens. When it comes to dragon stacking, ideally what you want to do is you want to get dragon or king dragon or whatever, maniac, and little dragon, and you just want to kind of rotate through them and spam them all. That is like the ideal way to dragon stack. You have to throw meat shields up in front, of course. I think that goes without saying. And then just kind of let them do work. It's very, very effective for the early game and mid game. And it trivializes a ton of stages. However, there are some interesting downsides to this strategy. It really does require a fair bit of attention if you want to pull it off properly. Firstly, you have to pay attention to how many meat shields you have and spam them accordingly. Realistically, when it comes to Tank Cat at least, if he's off cooldown, you should be using him. Well, that's just my 2 cents. In addition to that, there are some stages where you don't want your stack to move too quickly, too fast. Reason for this is there are a few stages where the opposing team's cat tower, the damage it takes will lead to certain enemies being spawned. This is usually true for boss enemies. And you want a decent enough dragon stack to deal with those boss enemies and really just knock them down, or at least knock them back, before they have a chance to obliterate your front line. Many bosses in this game do area attacks, and area attacks have a nasty habit of just eating through meat shields en masse. So the best way to get rid of that is to just make sure they never have an opportunity to attack by hitting them with so much damage that it forces a knockback and then resets their attack animation. That's ideally how dragon stacking works. There are inherent disadvantages to it as well. Firstly, it's not viable endgame. As soon as wave attacks start becoming a thing, dragon stacking is too risky. It takes a long time to pull off a stack properly, and it can proc a pretty visceral reaction depending on how much time you sunk into that stack. Regardless, it's just best avoided. And to be fair, once you get to Uncanny Legends in general, which is what I consider to be endgame, you should have better specialized units for each stage. Dragon Cat and King Dragon Cat are really more all-around units in more ways than not, at least in terms of their raw stats. It is good they have a long-range attack, and they have pretty decent speed and everything else, but there are better units to tackle most stages, as unfortunate as that is. So the odds of you really needing to use them in endgame proper are fairly few and far between. There are certainly stages where they're viable on, but they're never really likely to make it into your general loadout. On the subject of Dragon and King Dragon, there's always this interesting debate between the two of them. So King Dragon's stats are better, but his cooldown is a fair bit long. So he's not as good at dragon stacking, at least in terms of the spam element. However, there are a couple stages where money can be quite tight. And that should be kind of the main indicator between which one to go with. Both are fine forms, both serve a pretty good purpose, but there is a double-edged sword to using King Dragon Cat that should be taken into effect. For a few cats, it can be said that true form is always better than their evolved form. The lizard cat is one of those cats where there is a little bit of a conversation around that. Now let's take a look at his cat combos. Up first, we have King and Queen. This cat combo involves King Dragon Cat and Ice Queen stat, and this is a worker cat start level up. So your worker cat starts with +1. Well, whoop-de-doo. I consider this to be absolutely worthless. Especially at the point of getting Ice Queen Cat. Like, man, how insulting. Ponos, please rework this. Great idea in theory, but awful perk associated with it. Up next, we have Firewatch. This is a weaken enemy effect up. This involves Lizard Cat, Crazed Lizard Cat, and Fire Squad Kichiyama. And weaken duration is increased by 10%. Another one I wouldn't consider to be particularly useful. Odds are if you have Crazed Lizard Cat and Lizard Cat, you're going to be dragon stacking, and the whole idea of dragon stacking is to prevent the enemy from attacking at all, so a weaken effect up is really not at all useful. Up next, we have 3 kings, which we've actually talked about before, funny enough, with Lion Cat's video. Involves Madame King, King Dragon Cat, and Lion Cat, and it's a unit defense up and increases Cat's health by 10%. This is actually considered to be fairly useful for some stages where tankiness is an issue. How useful it is super stage dependent, and ideally your meat shield spam should be enough to compensate for any health defects. But there's some cool combinations with this one in particular. Check out the Lion Cat video for more information. Up next, we have Pointy Bits, which is a strengthen effect up involving Togalon Pasalon, and King Dragon Cat. And this combination causes the strengthen up buff to increase by 20%. Now this can actually be pretty useful depending on the stage. If your damage output isn't quite there and you're trying to rush a stage, I think this could actually be pretty viable. I'm not a huge fan of all of the Luga cat combos, but this one is actually pretty dang decent. Up next, we have Age of Dinosaurs. This is a cat base defense up and involves Lizard Cat and Jurassic Cat. Cat base health is increased by 20%. I generally don't like these. The issue I have with the cat base defense ups is they don't really tend to make that much of a difference. If enemies are at your doorstep, especially towards mid and end game, they are going to chew through your base health almost immediately. Certainly for boss stages, 1, 2, maybe 3 hits and it's gone. Reduced to ashes, as they say. So an extra 20%, whoop-de-doo, man. It doesn't solve any problems, doesn't buy you any real time. I don't really consider it worth it. I like Jurassic Cat though, so I mean I guess if you have an unused slot and you just want another combo. Now that we are at the end of our little show here, let me show you all of Dragon Cat's stats while reading you some trivia. Lizard Cat has the highest range of all normal cats, which is where he gets most of his usefulness from. King Dragon Cat's design may be a reference to Gamora from the Ultra series, as they both sport spikes on their bellies and horns that extend sideways. Lizard Cat is the only normal cat to be in an event capsule, being in the Summer Break Cats specifically, which is actually true. I never really thought too much about it, but fair enough. Very interesting stuff. In any case, I just want to take a moment and thank all the people who have liked, commented, and subscribed so far. Definitely makes doing this a fair bit worth it. I don't know if the people viewing this video might know this, but I actually have a pretty significant following in Asia. Like my Japanese and Taiwanese viewership basically overshadow my North American viewership, which is pretty interesting. So to all of you guys, thank you as well, strange as it might be. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. If there's anything that I've missed or misrepresented or you feel you could do a little bit better justice on, feel free to comment it down beneath. I really do appreciate it, and so do the people viewing this video. So feel free to share any stories involving Dragon Cat and getting your stack wiped out, just as a cautionary tale if nothing else. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can get Cat God's blessing on your next gacha roll. In any case, thank you so much everyone. Great having you here, and until next time.